Aloha and bienvenido to Hispanic Hawaii. I'm Richard Concepcion. Today's program is about domestic violence awareness, because together we can stop the cycle of violence. Today's guest is Charito Rivera. She is a domestic violence specialist, and she is here to help us to understand what domestic violence is, how to prevent it, how to get help, and also how to be able to identify some of these issues and concerns, and also talk about how affecting our community. We want to say welcome to the show, Charito. Thank you for coming. I know you are so busy and taking some time out of your busy schedule to help the Hispanic community to understand what domestic violence is and how we can prevent it.
It's actually my pleasure, and thank you so much, Richard, for having me here. Hispanic Latin Connection, thank you so much, as well as ThinkTech Hawaii. Thank you so much for having me here.
Well, I know you've been working with the domestic violence community for many years, but let's start by telling me a little bit about yourself, and also what inspired you to become a domestic violence specialist or counselor?
Okay, so I started off when I was doing my bachelor's in social work. So we did this community service at one of the shelters, and I did that volunteer work. We painted the house, did some renovations and whatnot, and then after that, I became a member of the AmeriCorps, and there so happened that there was an opening at that place, at one of the domestic abuse shelter, and that's how I started. And since then, it's been 13 years actually.
Wow.
I've been there, and it was my platform when I was Miss Hawaii United States, and it was also my platform when I was Miss Hawaii America.
Oh, wow.
And with or without a crown, you know what? I'm going to continue. It's something I'm passionate about.
That's the key, help the community to understand. Can you help me to define what domestic violence is?
Thank you for asking that, because it's very important we recognize all the different types of domestic violence. Most oftentimes we associate physical abuse as domestic violence only. However, domestic violence is a pattern of abuse behavior towards somebody, whether it's your partner now, or your partner before. And that's different types. There's verbal abuse, there's physical abuse, emotional, financial, sexual, spiritual, social with the technology now, and as well as mental abuse.
Wow, that's difficult.
So we can go ahead and talk about that if we can pull out the, let's see here.
Well, let's pull out the slide real quick. We can talk about how we can kind of identify, because it's different power and control, right?
Yeah, so it's a way to gain power and control over your partner. So if you see on the slide, there's using intimidation, that leads to mental abuse as well as emotional abuse. And what that means is, just whether you're a guy or you're a woman, you're using your authority, like, well, I'm a woman and you should do this for me, or I'm a man of the house and you should do this for me. And it becomes a pattern where it doesn't even give the other person the freedom to, I have a choice here also, I have a voice here also. And then the other ones you see are using emotional abuse. That's example of that could be just blaming the other person, turning the situation around, and not taking accountability for any type of behavior at all, whether it be lying or using the children, for example, or just taking control of the financial. A lot of the times in Hawaii, especially for militaries, using isolation is very common. And the reason being is we're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, so there's a time difference already. And without a cell phone, I mean, how do we communicate now? Yes, good thing is there is a, what do you call the internet.
The internet. But you talk about isolation, they're unable to communicate with family members or friends?
Yes, and that could also start at home, where nobody can come and visit you, or nobody can call you, or just you can't go out. You are to stay at home. That's controlling. That's showing that's isolating the person. already, and that's also another form of physical abuse. And other ones here that you see is minimizing or denying and blaming, and I mentioned that earlier. That's blaming everything on the other person, not taking accountability at all or responsibility for any of the things you've said or done. And it's important to actually minimize that and actually work on not doing it, because it can escalate, and we're going to go ahead with the cycle of abuse. But again, that's just another type of gaining power and control. Another one that's here, I mentioned also earlier, is using children. Very common with the couples who are married or just have children together but not married. Say, oh, well, you're not going to get to see the children then, or the child then, if you don't give me this, or if you don't do this. No. It could also be one example I've seen a lot in my 10 years, actually 13 years in the domestic violence field, is they would use the children to send message to the other parent. So at times, even though there's a restraining order in place, they'd use the children and say, well, you can tell your dad this. A person goes to the dad, and then the dad would be like, well, you can tell your mom this, that she is BS and this and that. And
so how does that affect the kids? Now he's the messenger going back and forth.
A very, very long-term effect, because just imagine living in a home where this is going on. There's screaming involved, there's manipulation, there's lying, there's name-calling and whatnot. Imagine that child growing up. That's all that child knows. The child don't get help from other community resources or other adults, like other family members that, hey, that's wrong, that's not normal. That child is going to grow up knowing relationship as that. Therefore goes on and goes into a relationship, and there's what issue arise, and it's like, well, then I do the same thing, which is, it probably involves lying, manipulation, and screaming and yelling.
So the child start learning that behavior as well.
Yeah, we've heard that phrase, monkey see, monkey do. So, where most likely what you see, you can follow through. But again, we can all take part of this as a community and stop that cycle. So it's important, whether you're a teacher or you're a babysitter or a public servant, for example, and there's this issue in the community, to all tackle it together and work together. So other things that we can identify also as far as domestic violence is using male privileges, and I did mention earlier also female, because yes, the high majority of victims are female. And the reason being is because, just look at our frame, body from our strength, for example, But also who reports more. Men tend to not report as much as female. Why? I've heard it a lot when I answer the hotlines before, and said, this is so shame. Sometimes they would even call the hotline and say, hey, I have a friend who is in a domestic violence situation. Can you help me? And by staying on the phone with them, then the more we learn that actually that person that they're talking about is actually themselves. It's just that they couldn't open up right away, because it's a shameful thing, I guess, for a guy, But it's okay to also do that.
Yes.
So other ones here, using economic abuse. That's financial abuse, as I mentioned earlier. That's example I've witnessed myself is having the change to a T. Like if the merchandise was $4.59, the partner better come home with a 1 cent extra in there, part of the change, and they need to come home in a certain time. Whatever you get. Like for example, well, I needed her to be at home at 6 o'clock with all the change, and the wife has no access to that at all. That's a form of abuse already, especially if that was not the agreement between them.
So if she's not working, then it's worse because he controls the money.
Oh yes, and that happens a lot, even especially in the military. And it doesn't even have to be in the military. It happens a lot in a community. But in Hawaii, a lot of families now have the parents have 2 jobs, just to cover the expenses, because as we know in Hawaii, it's very expensive, right? But what happens in a financial abuse, one gets control of the financial more than the other. And sometimes, too, it's just a form of a way to say, you know what, I'm not going to give you this if you don't do this. It's also a way to threaten the other person that they're not going to give them what they need if they don't do something for them, whether it's a sexual act or just simply doing the dishes or doing the dinner. It's sort of like that. I know it's
just
like
titties, right?
Yes.
Oh,
But
wow.
all those, it just escalates and escalates. So I think there's one more here that we can talk about. Using coercion and threats. I brought that up earlier. It's threatening, even just going like this, but doesn't go all the way. And you keep doing that, and you can see that the other person is not okay with it. They flinch. Because maybe that other person already went through domestic violence before, and they're letting you know that, hey, that's not okay. When you love somebody and they're letting you know that that's not okay, you would think that, that's a time to stop right there. Because in a healthy relationship, we're able to talk things out and say what you don't like, what you like, and things that you don't like. Then the other person has the understanding that, okay, this person, my loved one, my partner doesn't like that, and I need to stop that. In an unhealthy relationship, however, continuation of threats happens. Like I mentioned earlier, whether it's financial, like I'm not going to give you money if you don't do this for me, or even I'm going to hit you if you say one more thing, or things like that.
Wow.
And for most people too, like for the ones with guns, I mean, even just putting it down like that on the table, but not pointing it at the person, that's a form of threat right there. I mean, how would you feel?
Yeah.
You're talking.
It's a threat.
It's getting escalated, conversation escalated, and there's a gun in front, or even a knife. That's
you feel
a form of
intimidated.
threat
It's kind of hard. Wow,
Another form of physical is keeping the person in the room, not allowing them to leave. For example, the person said, you know what, I need a timeout. I need to just leave.
I need to go shopping. No, you can go.
Or even just like, because there's an argument going on and you want to just leave and just take a break, take a timeout. And that's really the best thing to do. But in an abusive relationship, one person wants to gain power and control, therefore they won't allow the other person to leave.
Space. Wow.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. Let me ask you one question here, reference to children. When do parents get to know there's something happening that is affecting the children, because they are so busy dealing with this situation? Does anybody in the school are trained to identify children that are in a domestic violence relationship?
There's definitely factors or symptoms you can look for. For example, for children who may come to school dirty, that should be a flag right there. If the child comes home like looking depressed, like just sad and not wanting to be with the children, I would encourage educators or teachers to then go up to the child and just have a conversation. They might open up, they may not, but take that opportunity to even just simply ask, how are you? How's mom and dad? It's even okay. Wow. So there's many factors. They come in with bad hygiene, and some kids, when they tell you that they've been, whether it's sexually abused, take it seriously.
Okay.
Because a lot of the times, statistically, they won't tell someone else after.
Oh, wow.
Because if the person they went to didn't believe them, most likely they're not going to tell someone else, because they're going to say, who's going to believe me? So
the teacher have to be trained and understand what is happening with the child in the school. So we're going to take a quick break.
Okay.
And we're going to continue the conversation about domestic violence awareness after this message.
All right.
Hello, hi, I'm Dave Stevens, the host of the Cyber Underground on ThinkTechHawaii.com, airing every Friday at 1 p.m. And I love ThinkTech Hawaii because it allows me to get the word out about cybersecurity and how dangerous this world can be with technology. Well, for the first time, ThinkTech Hawaii is participating in an online web-based fundraising campaign to raise $40,000. Give Thanks to ThinkTech will run only during the month of November, and you can help. Please donate what you can so that ThinkTech Hawaii can continue to raise public awareness and promote civic engagement through free programming like mine. I've already made my donation and look forward to yours, so please send in your tax-deductible contribution by going to this website. It's on the screen right now, www.thanksforthinktech.causevox.com. On behalf of the community enriched by ThinkTech Hawaii's 30-plus weekly shows, mahalo for your generosity.
Welcome back to Hispanic Hawaii. We're here with Charito Rivera, domestic violence specialist. She's here to help us to understand what domestic violence is, how to prevent it, and also how to get help. Well, welcome back.
Thank you again for having me here, and thank you, ThinkTech Hawaii.
All right,
for having us
perfect.
Here.
Let's talk about some of the risks that people are taking into the relationship in the domestic violence.
The risk, we mentioned it earlier, the long-term effect, whether there's a child or not. I mean, for us as an adult, you get into a relationship at 20 years old, and that's the only type of relationship you know. You're going to carry it on to your 30s and 40s and 50s if you don't do something about it. So, and the worst part is it could turn deadly. And we're going to talk about that, the cycle of abuse.
Okay.
Because, like I mentioned, it could turn deadly if it doesn't get, you don't get help right away. It could just escalate. And if we could look at that picture there.
It's right there.
So you can see in the beginning of a relationship, we all go through that honeymoon period.
Yes.
Everything is good, you know, and then we learn more about the person, things we don't like about the person. In a healthy relationship, we're able to communicate and say, you know, I noticed you did this, and, you know, can we talk about it? Maybe, you know, and talk and compromise on something. And then there's apologies and promises going to happen again, and it won't happen again in a healthy relationship. In an unhealthy relationship, abusive relationship, however, there's a promise that maybe there's no more alcohol in the house or there's no more drugs, but that promise gets broken, and then tensions build up, and then it explodes because the other person just keeps saying, hey, you promised you're not going to do this anymore, and the other person's like, well, who are you to tell me? I'm an adult. And then the explosion happens, and then there's apologies again, like I'm not going to do it anymore, or sometimes the perpetrator even says, well, you made me drink or you made me do it. And then the tension again. So it's just like this cycle that if you don't break it right away, it's just going to keep going. And statistically, it takes about 7 times for the victim to actually leave the abusive relationship. 7 times.
7 times going through the cycle.
Yes. And I'm talking about also leaving the relationship, not just getting out of that cycle, because they may think that they're getting out of the cycle by, you know what, I'm going to speak up for myself, but for the sake of the kids, they stay.
So how can you prevent this?
Good question. I would say it starts with us, ourselves. So if you are in an abusive relationship, how do you prevent it? You're already in an abusive relationship, seek help together. If you plan to stay together, seek help together. Because not one person is going to be able to stop the cycle. Because I say this, one person can take anger management as many times as he or she wants, but if the other person continues the same behavior, abusive behavior and whatnot, it's going to continue. So if there's anger issues and whatnot, go together. If there's a stress, very poor coping skills, go together and learn about other ways to cope with the issues. If it's a financial issue, go see a financial advisor or something. If it's anger issue, go seek the anger management class. And if it's children's issue, there's all that resources, community resources available, and we'll have that slide for them.
Now, let me ask you, on the 13 years that you've been working as a domestic violence specialist, have you experienced any couple that went through the cycle and they're still together today?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And I can give an example. And I'm not going to give the name for confidentiality, but there's been one where when she first came in, there was nothing, no clothes. There was a fight, and she could not run away with no bags, nothing at all, just underwear. And I asked, "What's your goal?" I said, "Well, I wanna stay with him. It's just I don't know what to do." So then, okay. She continued to seek help. She continued to stay at the shelter, and then helping her rebuild her self-esteem. Her self-esteem, because what happens when you're in a relationship is you get called names so many times that you start to believe it. You're crazy, you're bipolar, all that words, So start believing those. So first work with herself, and then that gave time for the husband as well to work on himself. And then after they work on themselves, then eventually they went to therapy together, counseling together, and up to this day they're still taking anger management, because the best time, which you see the cycle of abuse earlier, the best time to actually go for help is when you are in the honeymoon period. Because when you're in honeymoon period, everything is good. Like, you
So you
feel
gotta
good.
come back to the honeymoon.
Yes.
Okay.
When somebody says, "I'm sorry," you know what? Right away then, seek help. Go to an anger management class, or go to a financial advisor right away to handle those financial issues and whatnot. That's the right time, because then we feel good. Like, there's no this tension. Because imagine there's two people asking for help, and there's tension already. They'd be like just blaming each other.
That's true. That's true.
And someone is going to be walking an eggshell, because when they get home, then there's going to be more argument.
Well, let me ask you, why so many people, they're in the domestic violence relationship and they stay there? Because a lot of people say, well, if you're in a domestic violence, you just got to leave. So how difficult is to do that? And if you decide to leave, what do you take with you? And where do you go?
That's a very common question you would hear from somebody who's not in the situation. Like, why'd you stay? Why don't you just leave him? If he's that bad, or if she's that bad, why don't you just leave him? Sometimes there's factors to why a person can't leave. So, for example, it could be financial. If the person don't have a job, then how can, there's a fear, the fear of the unknown. But the number one, according to statistics, why people stay in an abusive relationship, and I can speak for myself because I've gone through at least a 2 month of that, is there's that hope. We're hopeful human beings. There's hope that the person is going to change. Because in the honeymoon phase, in the beginning of a relationship, we've seen the good in that person. So there's that hope that that good in that person is going to come back. Like, oh no, I can change him or her, because I've seen the good in him, and I can bring that out again. Not knowing that, hey, maybe that person has a history of domestic violence from before that has not been taken care of, and it just keeps coming back. So why? Again, the number one is that hope. And then it could be financial, it could be there's no support system around, and the only support they know is their husband or their wife. And as ironic as it is, even though they're the one who's abusing them, that's their support, that's all they know. And then again, children is one big reason why women stay. They want their child to stay and have a mom, dad, grow up in a family environment.
Okay, tell me some of the places or how they can get in contact with people that can help them.
Okay, sure. And if there's one slide here that we can look at, and feel free to actually take a picture of this on your phone if you are to be watching right now. Number one, for the military services, it's at the bottom, and then there's Domestic Violence Action Center. There's also 4 different types of shelter on Oahu. one on the leeward side, and without disclosing the location, of course, on the windward side and Honolulu. So there's 4. They have 24-hour hotlines that they can call, and if you can look at the numbers here, see here, there's this 532-6100 is a domestic options to violence. Oh, right there, 681 or 841-0822, I'm sorry.
Okay.
That's the number to call if you are wanting to seek help. However, if you don't get any of this right here that you see on the screen, call 411. Because when you call 411, say, hey, I'm going through this, do you have any agency who can help me? They're great at it. I've used them so many times. Even as a domestic violence specialist, I call them and say, you know what, because things change, you know, with all the cuts in funds sometimes.
True.
We gotta utilize 411. Also 911. The best way. You're in a abusive situation. You know what? Don't stay there. Don't try to argue. Don't try to reason with somebody who's unreasonable already. Just get out, seek help. If you cannot, just stay calm, and then when it's safe, get out.
All right, we want to say thank you so much for coming to Hispanic Hawaii and speak with us and speak to the Hispanic community about domestic violence. Thank you.
Muchas gracias for having me again. Latin Connection, thank you so much. And also, ThinkTech Hawaii, thank you so much for having me here and having this platform to talk about domestic violence and awareness.
All right. We want to say thank you so much and muchas gracias. And don't forget, if you want to watch the Hispanic Hawaii, again, you can go to ThinkTechHawaii.com, or any other host or any other program, you can go to ThinkTechHawaii.com. And if you want to be a guest on my show, you can send me an email at richconcept@gmail.com. Gracias and thank you.